Hi everyone. Today I want to talk to you about budgets. What is a budget? Now, a budget is, in simple terms, because remember, you can budget as a person, as an individual, with your family, with your spouse, with your children, or you can have a whole big formal budget as a business. So I'm going to break it down for you in just 5 minutes and tell you all about budgets and why you need a budget and why you need to stick to a budget and how it's going to help you. Now, a budget is a formal plan that you put in place. You're looking at your expected income, you're looking at your expected expenditure, as well as your expected profit or loss in a certain period. In most instances, you would be looking at a 12-month period. Sometimes you can actually have a budget stretching over several years. What is the difference between a budget and a cash flow forecast? Well, it's almost the same thing. A budget will simply tell you how you're intending to keep your costs at a certain amount and how much income you expect to make, and it helps you to stick to what you intend at the beginning to do. So the forecast, as I said, very similar, but the difference is you're simply telling the people out there to say, this is what I'm expecting to make. This is how much I'm expecting to bill or to invoice. These are the expected expenses. And sometimes it's more inflow versus outflow than it is actual invoices. So sometimes it can look at the actual amount you expect to receive in a month. Therefore, if you are selling on credit, your inflows may not tie up with your amounts invoiced, your sales, because you might invoice today and only get paid next month or in 2 months' time. So those are all little things you need to look at when you're doing your budget. But if we are to simplify it, I would simply say you need to have a budget. You need to know what your costs are on a monthly basis, your baseline cost, your basic costs. In other words, for you to just function as a company, these things, your rent, for instance, or maybe you have a bond, you have telephone bills, maybe you have electricity and water, salaries if you have. If you're buying stock for resale, you can also factor that in. Any other costs, whether you're doing subscriptions, whether you've got your Wi-Fi, put those costs together and be able to say, this is my expected monthly expenditure, right? If you put it on a spreadsheet or you enter it into your software, you would then be able to now say, well, versus this, I intend to invoice, say, for instance, 10 clients, or maybe it's just one client that'll be able to cover all your bills, or I intend to make sales of a certain value, and that covers my expenses. You can then tell whether on a monthly basis you're sinking or swimming. You can also then measure your current performance against your budget and be able to tell whether you're doing well, whether you're sticking to what you propose to do, or whether you're falling short. Then you can execute corrective measures and say, listen, for me to meet these expenses, I actually need to make, for instance, 90,000 Rand in sales if I'm to able to cater for all our basic needs, never mind the investments or savings. And if I'm not actually meeting that on a monthly basis, then my marketing, my sales, my advertising, something is wrong. And you can then begin to work towards increasing your sales. You need to be able to then look at budget versus actual. You need to be able to look at last year's budget versus this year's budget and be able to come up with the variances, the corrective measures, and make it work for you. All in all, a budget should help you to keep things in track, in perspective, to be able to tell on a monthly basis where you're falling short, where you're failing, if you're doing well, if you're improving. those sort of things. You should also be able to tell your trends to say, well, for instance, if you're selling ice cream, you'd know that in the winter months, your sales are low. In the summer months, it's a boost. In spring, everyone's buying ice cream. Or in certain areas, people are watching their weight. They're not, or certain age groups. So you need to factor in all those little things for your budgets to be realistic. You also need to make sure that you've done your research and you are not measuring your current performance against an unrealistic budget, because all you'll do is set yourself to fail. So make sure your budget is realistic, it's achievable, it makes sense, it's been tried and tested, and off you go to a great start. Have a wonderful evening.